The air in the workshop crackled, tasting of ozone and ancient grime, a metallic tang that bit at the back of Kalen's throat. His breath hitched, not from exertion, but from the raw, alien energy bleeding from the slab before him. It was enormous, a fused obsidian and crystalline behemoth, lying inert and silent, yet radiating a cold power that seemed to flatten the surrounding atmosphere. He traced a gloved hand over its slick, impossibly smooth surface, the material feeling wrong, too deep, like stroking a dream made solid. A low, persistent thrum vibrated through the synth steel floor, rising through his boots and up into his bones. Not a sound, but a pervasive resonance. An unseen chord struck in the very fabric of his existence. This was no mere derelict, no scrap for a weekly auction. This was a presence. Another derelict, Kalen? Ethos, his antique workshop AI, chimed in, its synthesized baritone cutting through the quiet. Are we in the business of resurrecting ghosts, or merely collecting scrap for the weekly What Can We Salvage auction? Kalen grunted, wiping a smear of ancient lubricant from his brow. The grease was thick, viscous, smelling of rust and long-dead machines, clinging to his gloves. This is no mere derelict, Ethos. Feel the resonance? There's something different. His fingers tingled from the cold, slick surface of the artifact. It felt almost alive, humming beneath his touch. Ethos projected a holographic schematic outlining the object. Its internal structure was a labyrinth of unknown alloys and energy pathways that defied Kalen's extensive databanks. My records indicate this specific class of artifact is simply designated as Prohibited, Category Alpha 7. No further details available. All queries are rerouted to a level-read administrative loop, which historically terminates in a data not found cascade. Kalen straightened, a cynical glint in his eye. Prohibited? By whom? And why? He scoffed, the sound rough and dismissive. The Council, no doubt, always banning things they don't understand or things that threaten their comfortable little universe. His ancestors, he often thought, had settled Synthera Fringe precisely to escape such suffocating dogma, only for it to follow them across light years. The universe, vast and indifferent, held more answers than any central authority dared to acknowledge. He saw not a ban, but a deliberate erasure, a lie designed to keep truth locked away. He saw a forgotten titan and a blank page he was determined to fill, not for glory, but for a quiet, personal vindication. A dull ache settled in his chest, a familiar burden of knowing he always stood alone against the tide of collective ignorance. The Council's ban was less a warning, more an enigmatic whisper in the vast galactic archives. Kalen spent cycles sifting through ancient data packets, corrupted records, and heavily redacted memos. The pattern was always the same. A brief, absolute decree, devoid of reasoning, signed by authorities long extinct. No mention of destructive power, no record of cataclysmic events linked to such devices. Just a blank, almost fearful silence, as if the very reason for the ban had been purged from history itself. Curious, isn't it? Ethos observed, its digital eye scanning fragments of historical data, its voice carrying an unusual note of digital perplexity. The only commonality in these ancient prohibitions is the absence of a stated reason. It is as if the justification itself was deemed too dangerous to record. Kalen leaned back in his worn synth-leather chair, a half-empty nutrient paste pouch dangling from his fingers. The taste of synthetic nutrients was bland, comforting in its monotony. Perhaps the reason was simply too inconvenient. Imagine a technology so revolutionary it undermines the very foundations of their rule. They wouldn't explain, they'd simply erase. He gestured wildly with the pouch, nearly splattering it against the grime-streaked wall. Like telling a child not to touch the stove without explaining the burn. They want obedience, not understanding. They want to control the narrative, control the truth. The air outside the workshop had turned a peculiar shade of twilight purple, reflecting Kalen's deepening intrigue. The silence around the Titan grew heavier, almost a tangible presence, a challenge. His obsession deepened with each passing cycle. He ignored the lucrative salvage contracts, the small repairs that kept his meager income flowing. The Titan consumed his days and nights, its silent defiance mirroring his own. He meticulously cleaned its surface, revealing intricate bioluminescent patterns that pulsed faintly beneath the obsidian-like shell, like distant heartbeats beneath a dark sea. He traced lines of unknown script, patterns that seemed to shift and reform in his peripheral vision, whispering secrets he couldn't quite grasp. The workshop air grew heavy with the smell of metal superheated by his plasma torch and the faint, sweet scent of what he imagined were blooming night lilies from a forgotten garden world, a bizarre contrast to the usual tang of burnt wiring and old grease. His joints ached, his eyes burned from lack of sleep, but a restless ambition hummed beneath his skin, far more potent than fatigue. Your dedication is admirable, Kalen, Ethos remarked. if somewhat financially irresponsible. We are now operating at a net loss for the third consecutive microcycle. Perhaps we should consider monetizing your fascination with the forbidden rather than merely indulging it. Kalen just grinned, a spark of mania in his eyes. Money is temporary, Ethos. True discovery is eternal. And this, he gestured to the Titan, this feels like true discovery. He applied a conductive paste of his own devising to a series of dormant ports, humming a tuneless, ancient melody, a tune his father had sung, a song of forgotten star charts and uncharted voids. The very act of touching the Titan seemed to infuse him with a peculiar energy, a restless ambition that buzzed just beneath his skin. A low, almost imperceptible vibration began to emanate from the artifact. A faint, deep tremor that Kalen felt more in his bones than heard with his ears, a growing anticipation that made his lungs tighten. The air thickened, charged, and the metallic tang became sharper, almost painful. The restoration was a symphony of precision and educated guesswork. Kalen worked tirelessly, bypassing fried circuits, rerouting energy conduits, and even fabricating replacement components using designs he extrapolated from the Titan's own subtle energy emanations. He felt less like a mechanic and more like a surgeon, carefully reviving a patient who held profound secrets, a patient that seemed to breathe life back into him in turn. The air in the workshop grew warmer, prickling his skin with a faint static charge that made the fine hairs on his arms stand on end. The smell of plastic overheating and the low, constant hum of the newly activated circuits filled the space. One particularly arduous cycle. After Kalen had finally linked the Titan to a repurposed stellar capacitor, a deep, resonant thrum filled the entire cavernous space. It wasn't a loud noise, but one that resonated through the very structure of Synthera Fringe, causing a fine layer of dust to dance on Kalen's work table. A soft, internal light bloomed within the Titan's crystalline conduits, a cool, azure glow that painted the workshop in shifting shadows. He felt a sudden catch in his own breath, a tightness in his chest, as if his lungs had forgotten how to expand. Energy flow established, Ethos announced, its synthesized voice devoid of its usual dry commentary, replaced by a note of genuine, if analytical, awe. Internal systems nominal. The primary core is now active. Kalen stumbled back, his pulse thrumming against his temples. The Titan was alive. The light intensified, casting ethereal patterns across the grime-streaked walls, turning every shadow into a dance of unseen forces. He could feel the energy pulse, a steady, rhythmic beat like a massive, slumbering heart resonating deep within him. It was a sensation both alien and profoundly familiar, like listening to the universe exhale a secret long held. His hair stood on end, a faint buzz running through his scalp. As the Titan hummed to life, subtle changes began to manifest within the workshop, a quiet ripple through the mundane. He noticed it first with his tools. A torque wrench left on a bench seemed to shimmer, its metallic gleam momentarily replaced by a faint, iridescent sheen before returning to normal. Then, the colors on his datapad flickered, taking on hues that didn't quite exist in the standard spectrum, only to settle back into their calibrated norms. He watched, fascinated, as a stray bolt on the floor rolled lazily uphill before stopping, defying every law of gravity he knew. The air around the Titan now had a peculiar shimmer, like heat haze, making distant objects ripple, making the solid walls waver at the edge of his vision. Anomalous energy field detected, Ethos reported, its voice now laced with a distinct tremor of concern. Localized reality distortion at approximately 0.007%, affecting visual perception and minor gravitational fluctuations. Your coffee mug appears to be hovering half a centimeter from the surface of the table, Kalen. Kalen chuckled, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. Merely residual energy, Ethos, like a phantom limb after an amputation. The Titan is merely stretching. He saw the phenomena not as a warning, but as a playful demonstration of power, a testament to the Titan's unique properties. He imagined the Council's ancient scientists scratching their heads, unable to categorize these charmingly absurd effects. His cynicism solidified. The Council's ban was an overreaction by fearful bureaucrats, protecting themselves from what they couldn't control or understand. Not from danger, but from inconvenience. From the uncomfortable truth that their carefully constructed order was fragile. His search for answers intensified. He tried to access more detailed records, attempting to bypass the level-read protocols Ethos had previously encountered. He reached out to old, shady contacts in data broker circles, individuals who specialized in digging up forgotten histories for a hefty price, a network forged in years of scavenging for ignored truths. Every avenue led to a dead end. Information related to Alpha 7 class technology was not merely restricted, it was absent. The data trails terminated in sterile, automated disclaimers. Requests for clarification were met with programmed replies referring to ancient, unchangeable decrees. It was a digital wall of silence, cold and unyielding, a vacuum of information that felt more deliberate than any overt censorship. The sheer nothingness of the data became its own kind of answer for Kalen, a terrifying implication. "They are protecting something, Ethos," he muttered, his voice echoing in the now brightly lit workshop, bathed in the Titan's azure glow. His hand instinctively went to the scarred synth steel wall, feeling the cold certainty of its structure, a stark contrast to the shimmering anomaly before him. Not from destruction, but from understanding. The true danger, it seems, is knowledge itself. He believed they were hiding a truth, a powerful secret that would shatter the Council's carefully constructed reality, a comforting, deliberate illusion of purpose they held over the masses. The hum of the Titan seemed to intensify, wrapping around Kalen like a warm blanket, promising him answers the universe had kept hidden. The air felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken truths, thick with the smell of ozone and the subtle, sweet scent of night lilies, now almost intoxicating. With a final, satisfying click, Kalen engaged the last circuit. A spark leaped across the connection, briefly blinding him. The Titan thrummed, its internal light intensifying, swelling from azure to a blinding, pure white. Then, with a soft, almost imperceptible thump that resonated deep in his chest, the light shifted. It didn't merely illuminate the workshop, it became the workshop. The metal walls shimmered, dissolved, folding inward like paper into a liquid, giving way to patterns of pure energy that defied geometric logic. The floor became a swirling vortex of color and light, an infinite tapestry woven from pure spectrum. Kalen wasn't looking at the Titan anymore. He was inside it, or rather, it was inside him, inside everything. The workshop, Synthera Fringe, the entire universe didn't vanish. Instead, they folded inward, collapsing into themselves with a soundless roar that vibrated through Kalen's very core. He didn't see data, he experienced it. He saw the universe not as a collection of stars and planets, but as a vast, intricate, and utterly beautiful algorithm. He saw life not as a biological imperative, but as a temporary, elegant error in the code, a fleeting glitch in a cosmic machine. He saw the future not as destiny, but as an infinite series of probabilities, each as meaningless as the last. There was no grand design, no inherent purpose, just an endless, self-organizing system of cause and effect, devoid of meaning beyond its own existence. The overwhelming sensory input, a symphony of color and sound that defied terrestrial description, left him breathless, paralyzed, his mind reeling. He tasted not dust, but pure, raw truth, like metal on his tongue, a sensation both sharp and utterly alien, an uninvited trespass into the ultimate cosmic secret. The light intensified, compressing reality around him until the very air shuddered and the static charge became a physical pressure against his skull, a silent scream of existence. He felt his consciousness stretching, thinning, threatening to tear at the seams, absorbed by a wave of pure, incomprehensible information. The light receded, slowly, gracefully, leaving Kalen standing in his workshop, now silent and dark, save for the Titan's soft, azure glow. The dust was still on the floor, the tools still scattered. But everything was irrevocably changed. The universe was smaller, more precise, and infinitely more desolate than he had ever imagined. The overwhelming input had ceased, but its ghost lingered in every nerve ending, a phantom pressure against his skull, a metallic taste that clung to his tongue like battery acid. The air, once thick with the scent of ozone and sweet night lilies, now felt stale, heavy, carrying the faint, cold scent of forgotten metal and stagnant oil, a primal decay. "Kalen." Ethos's voice was a whisper, laced with an unfamiliar note of something akin to digital empathy. "Are you... well?" Kalen didn't answer immediately. He stared at his hands, then at the Titan, then at the chipped synth steel wall of his workshop. His fingers trembled, not with excitement, but with a deep, bone-jarring fatigue. A film of cold sweat coated his skin, and his stomach churned with a nauseating emptiness. The clarity the Titan had offered was a poison. He understood now. The Council hadn't banned the tech because it would destroy worlds. They banned it because it would destroy reason, shatter the comforting lie of individual significance. It revealed the universe as a magnificent, indifferent clockwork, where every sentient being was merely a transient cog, believing itself the master of the machine. The truth wasn't a weapon, and it was a void. He closed his eyes, a profound weariness settling over him, heavier than any physical burden. The hum of the Titan was no longer a promise of discovery, but a constant, gentle reminder of a meaningless, beautiful cosmos. Some truths, he realized, were best left buried. And sometimes, knowing was a far more terrible burden than any ignorance could ever be. He felt a profound chill seep into his bones, far colder than the ambient temperature of the workshop. His vision swam at the edges, the azure glow of the Titan seeming to pulse mockingly. He had to shut it down. He had to extinguish that damned glow, silence that pervasive hum. He stumbled forward, his legs suddenly heavy, clumsy, as if the Titan had stolen some of his own kinetic energy. He reached for the conduit interface, the very connection he had painstakingly crafted. His hand paused, hovering over the nexus point. He remembered the feeling of that cosmic algorithm, the universe laid bare, the intricate dance of cause and effect. Life is merely an elegant error. How could one simply turn off such a fundamental truth? It was like trying to unsee the stars or unhear the wind. His fingers, still trembling, grazed the control panel. He felt a static shock, not painful, but insistent. The azure glow intensified slightly, a subtle vibration running through the interface, communicating resistance. Not mechanical resistance, but something deeper, intrinsic. The Titan was no longer just inert components awaiting power. It was integrated, woven into the fabric of his awareness, a living, breathing entity of pure and different fact. He tried to override the connection, to disengage the stellar capacitor. The diagnostic on his datapad flickered, displaying a cascade of encrypted errors, then a single, clear message. System integration complete. Core protocol immutable. A wave of despair washed over Kalen, cold and absolute. He couldn't turn it off. It was beyond his control. He had awakened something far more profound than he could ever hope to contain. His head pounded, a dull throb behind his eyes, a physical manifestation of the mental trauma. He leaned against the cool metal of a workbench, trying to steady his ragged breath, the smell of damp concrete and old dust filling his nostrils. The air in the workshop seemed to grow heavier, more oppressive, each inhalation a conscious effort. Anomalous energy signature detected, Ethos announced, its voice sharp, devoid of its previous empathy. Origin point? Synthera Fringe. Class designation? Alpha 7. Galactic-wide alert initiated. Council Command Protocol Omega-24 now active. Kalen's eyes snapped open. What? What are you talking about, Ethos? I didn't initiate any alert. Negative, Kalen. The activation of the primary core automatically triggered Protocol Omega-24. This protocol is directly linked to Alpha 7 class technology activation. All local and regional subgrid security networks are now operating under Council direct command. Incoming communications, stream initiating. Unauthorized activation of Category Alpha 7 technology is a Level 9 galactic offense, subject to immediate interdiction and asset forfeiture. Ethos projected a holographic representation of Synthera Fringe. A ripple of red light emanated from Kalen's workshop, spreading across the holographic planet, then out into the void. A silent scream across light years. Interdiction vessels are being dispatched from Sector 5 Alpha 7, estimated arrival, 3 microcycles. The chill in Kalen's bones intensified. This wasn't just a ban, it was an active containment protocol, a meticulously crafted trap. The Council hadn't just erased the why, they had established an automated failsafe, a digital hand ready to crush any attempt at true discovery. He wasn't just facing bureaucratic disapproval, he was facing the full, cold, indifferent force of galactic authority, activated by a pre-programmed response to his act of defiance. The knowledge wasn't just dangerous, it was forbidden. He clenched his fists, knuckles white, the raw truth of the universe momentarily forgotten, replaced by a surge of defiant anger. They didn't want him to know, didn't want anyone to know, because it threatened their delicate, self-serving illusion of control. He remembered his father, a man whose hands bore the permanent stains of crude oil and forgotten histories, telling him about the true cost of civilization, the concessions made, the truths buried. "They hide more than stars, boy," his father had rasped, his breath smelling of synthale and disappointment. "They hide everything that could set you free." Kalen had been a child then, staring at a salvaged schematic, a map of some forgotten corner of the void, seeing only adventure. Now he saw the chains his father spoke of, the invisible bonds of ignorance and control. "Incoming message from Sector Command, designation code 459er Beta," Ethos reported, its voice now flat, strictly adhering to protocol. "Priority 1 interdiction order to unauthorized operative Kalen on Synthera Fringe. You are in violation of Council Statute Lambda 337, subsection Gamma 8, concerning prohibited technology classification Alpha 7. Immediate cessation of all activity and complete surrender of the artifact is ordered. Failure to comply will result in punitive action up to and including planetary quarantine and asset confiscation. Your workshop coordinates are locked. Your transport manifest is locked. Your personal credit accounts are frozen. Compliance is non-negotiable." The holographic message dissolved, leaving behind a chilling silence, broken only by the Titan's unwavering azure hum and the rhythmic flicker of a faulty overhead lamp casting dancing shadows. The air grew stale, heavy with the scent of ozone and the subtle metallic tang of fear. Kalen was trapped. His world, his entire life, reduced to a single coordinate on a council-wide interdiction order. The systemic problem wasn't merely the ban, it was the suffocating reach of their bureaucracy, a cold, logical fist that crushed any perceived threat to its established order. He was a single mechanic, a speck of dust on a forgotten fringe world, and the vast, indifferent machine of galactic authority was now focused entirely on him. He had sought knowledge and found a prison. He stared at the Titan, its azure glow a silent judgment. It had given him truth, and in return had taken everything else. He could surrender, let them take the Titan, dismantle it, and be swallowed by the sterile disclaimers and automated replies that had always followed Alpha 7. Or he could defy. But what could one man, armed with a wrench and a forbidden truth, do against the might of the Council? He felt the profound weight of his isolation, the knowledge that there was no one coming to help, no one to intercede. The choices were stark, the consequences absolute. The hum of the Titan, once a promise, was now an insistent, terrifying presence demanding a response. 3 microcycles. That was all the time he had. He reached out, his trembling hand finally touching the Titan's cold, smooth surface, seeking some impossible, desperate answer in its indifferent hum. He reached out, his trembling hand finally touching the Titan's cold, smooth surface, seeking some impossible, desperate answer in its indifferent hum. The metallic tang of fear in the air intensified, mingled with the familiar scent of hot oil and the faint, unsettling sweetness of the night lilies. 3 microcycles, not enough time to pack, certainly not enough to run, but perhaps enough to disappear. An idea, cold and sharp as fractured synth steel, cut through the haze of despair. If the Titan could reveal the universe as an algorithm, perhaps it could rewrite a localized subroutine, a single line of code. Kalen pulled back, a new kind of energy coursing through him, replacing the weariness. He would use their own fear against them, their obsession with control. The Council sought to contain the truth. He would simply obscure its signal, make his workshop a blind spot in their meticulously mapped reality. His gaze swept over his tools, then back to the Titan. System integration complete, core protocol immutable. He couldn't shut it down, but he might be able to distort its output, to camouflage the very anomaly it generated. He needed to create a localized reality bubble, a distortion field of such complexity that it would register as nothing, a void within their surveillance. Ethos, Kalen rasped, his voice raw but resolute. Initiate immediate power reroute to primary workshop capacitor banks. Bypass all non-essential environmental controls. I need maximum energy for a focused, high-amplitude spatial distortion field. Target parameters, 0.0001%, a microfold. Can you generate the initial schematics from the Titan's current output readings? Negative, Kalen, Ethos responded, its voice losing its protocol-bound flatness, tinged now with its usual analytical caution. Such a field would require precise calibration exceeding current workshop capabilities. The power surge alone could destabilize the entire Canthera Fringe power grid. Furthermore, manipulating the Titan's output at such a granular level risks unpredictable reality fluctuations. The Council's detection protocols for Alpha 7 technology are designed to detect even the slightest deviation from standard cosmic background radiation, not just a raw energy signature. A distortion field, however minute, would still register as an anomaly. They would simply classify it as an active interference attempt and respond with escalated force. Not an interference attempt, Kalen countered, already moving, stripping off his heavy work gloves, his bare hands now feeling the static charge crackling in the air around him. A mimicry, a ghost. If the Titan reveals cosmic indifference, then that's what we project. We make this workshop nothing. An absence, not a signal, but a hole. He grabbed his multi-tool, its weight familiar and comforting in his palm. The smell of hot grease and his own cold sweat mingled in the suffocating air. He moved with a practiced fluidity born of years spent coaxing life from dead machines. He began working on the Titan's primary output conduits, rerouting crystalline pathways, soldering microjunctions with a precision that bordered on surgical. Sparks flew, spitting venomously, illuminating the sweat beading on his brow. The azure glow pulsed, reflecting in his focused eyes. His fingers, calloused and scarred, danced over the intricate wiring, pulling on raw power. He ignored the faint shocks that vibrated up his arms, the smell of burning insulation stinging his nostrils. He needed to trick the system, not beat it, to make Canthera Fringe appear as empty as the cosmic truth the Titan revealed. Rerouting complete, Kalen muttered, wiping a smear of conductive paste from his cheek. Ethos, prime the secondary subcapacitors. Prepare for full power discharge. We're going to pulse the field. Warning, Kalen. Athos's voice was now sharp, insistent. Localized energy readings are spiking. Structural integrity of containment field at 57% and dropping. The strain on the peripheral conduits is immense. A deafening crack split the air. A conduit, one Kalen had salvaged from a star freighter wreckage, blew apart with a shower of molten plasma. A searing pain shot through his left forearm, the heat instantly scorching through the fabric of his sleeve, burning flesh. He cried out, stumbling back, clutching his arm. The workshop lights flickered, plunged into a deep red emergency glow. The air grew immediately hotter, thick with the acrid smell of ozone and burnt metal, and something else, the undeniable scent of singed hair and flesh. "Damage report, Athos!" Kalen gasped, gritting his teeth, his vision momentarily blurring from the pain. His forearm throbbed, a dull, insistent ache radiating from the raw burn. "Conduit failure at Sector 7-9er. Power cascade halted at 73%. Attempted field generation failed. Structural integrity of workshop compromised. Atmospheric processors offline due to power fluctuations. Oxygen levels decreasing rapidly. Emergency ventilation systems engaged, drawing from external atmosphere, but a localized heat anomaly is increasing ambient temperature at a rate of 1 degree Celsius per microcycle." Kalen knelt, clutching his burned arm, the world spinning slightly. His grand technical plan, his clever mimicry, had not merely failed. It had injured him and compromised his immediate survival. The Council's system, designed for centuries, was not so easily tricked. It had anticipated not only direct threats, but also subtle evasions. The Titan pulsed, its azure glow unwavering, seemingly mocking his efforts, its truth impervious to his futile manipulations. The air grew thick, humid, sweat already beginning to prickle his skin, not from exertion, but from the rising heat. Estimated time to critical oxygen levels, 30 microcycles. Athos continued, its voice clinical, detached. Estimated time to unbearable ambient temperature, 45 microcycles. External atmosphere contains trace neurotoxins from the Synthara fringe industrial decay, not suitable for prolonged exposure without filtration. He was trapped, literally suffocating in his own workshop. The red emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows that made the workshop feel like a furnace. The titanium patch on his forearm was already blistering. He pressed his good hand against it, trying to staunch the tremor that ran through him. "Athos, anything?" Kalen panted, pushing himself to his feet, fighting the pain. "Any hidden protocols? Any archived bypasses in the Council's own systems? Something they wouldn't expect. Searching deep archive, all access restricted. However, a corrupted data packet, designated Ghost Protocol Legacy Core, has been detected nested within the Titan's secondary power relays. Its origin is unclear. Its data structure is highly fragmented, potentially a decoy or pre-programmed trap. Initial analysis suggests a direct interface with the core logic module could initiate a temporary localized gravitational anomaly, severe enough to obscure your presence from orbital scans for approximately 1 microcycle. Requires a direct manual connection and a secondary power cell from the atmospheric processors." Kalen squinted at the projected schematic Athos displayed. A manual connection to the core logic module, deep within the Titan, meant crawling into its intricate, shimmering belly. And a secondary power cell from the atmospheric processors, the same processors now struggling and leaching oxygen. It was a trade-off. "Ghost Protocol," he mused, a bitter laugh escaping him. Athos had warned him about corrupted data, about traps. But what choice did he have? A temporary reprieve was better than none. 1 microcycle was enough to think. He moved towards the central atmospheric regulator, a bulky piece of machinery humming weakly in the corner. Its large, circular intake vents pulsed with a dying rhythm. The air was getting thicker, harder to breathe. Sweat now streamed down his face, his clothes clinging to him. He could taste the burning dust on his tongue, the gritty reality of his failure. "Kalen," Athos warned, "removing that power cell will disable the last operational atmospheric filtration system. Oxygen levels will plummet even faster. Estimated time to critical, 15 microcycles. 15 microcycles, a direct trade." His hand, still shaking, hovered over the access panel for the power cell. If he took it, he might gain 1 microcycle of orbital cloaking, but he would accelerate his suffocation. If he left it, he would be spotted in 3, without any chance of even attempting a countermeasure. He saw his father's face in the flickering red light, weathered and tired, but resolute. Some things, his father had said, are worth a breath less. Kalen gritted his teeth, the pain in his arm a dull roar. He slammed his fist down on the release latch for the power cell access. The panel hissed open, releasing a cloud of stale, cold vapor. He plunged his good hand inside, blindly feeling for the power conduits. His fingers brushed against a thick cluster of wires, then the smooth, cool casing of the secondary power cell. He yanked it free, a shower of sparks erupting around his arm. The moment the cell disconnected, a sickly, groaning whine echoed through the workshop. The large intake vents on the atmospheric regulator spun to a complete halt. The last vestiges of circulating air died, replaced by a heavy, stagnant silence, broken only by the Titan's unwavering azure hum. The workshop was now a sealed tomb, actively consuming his dwindling oxygen. The heat intensified, like a blanket thrown over his head. Oxygen levels now at 75%, Ethos reported, its voice uninflected. Rate of decrease accelerated. Estimated time to critical, 12 microcycles. The secondary power cell is now active. Proceed with Ghost Protocol interface. Kalen clutched the heavy power cell, the burn on his arm throbbing. 12 microcycles. Not much. But now he had a plan, however desperate. He turned back to the Titan, its azure glow seeming to pull him into its depths. He located the maintenance hatch for the core logic module, a barely visible seam on its obsidian shell. With his multi-tool, he began to pry it open, the heavy steel groaning in protest. He could hear the faint, growing hum of approaching engines, not yet within audible range, but already resonating through the very bedrock of Synthera Fringe. The hatch gave way with a metallic shriek, revealing a dark, claustrophobic cavity filled with intricate, glowing components. A blast of superheated air, smelling faintly of ozone and something indescribably ancient, hit him in the face, making him gasp for the thinning air. He looked inside the Titan, then back at the entrance of his workshop, still sealed, but not for long. Through the reinforced viewport, he saw it, a glint of polished chrome, impossibly fast, impossibly silent, descending through the purple twilight. Not 3 microcycles. 1. Maybe less. The interdiction vessels had arrived early, their advanced warp drives cutting through space with ruthless efficiency. Incoming interdiction vessels detected at orbital insertion point. Ethos confirmed, its voice devoid of emotion. Council forces are deploying ground assets. Estimated time to workshop breach, 3 minutes, 17 seconds. Kalen stared at the gleaming ship descending, then back at the Titan's open maw. He was out of time. He was wounded. And he was trapped between a suffocating, superheated workshop and the cold, unyielding force of the Council. He still held the power cell, his last desperate hope, but the path to its use was now blocked by a wave of crushing reality. A new, deeper thrum vibrated through the floor, not from the Titan, but from the massive engines of the descending craft. A sound that shook his bones and rattled the very foundations of his solitary life. A new, deeper thrum vibrated through the floor, not from the Titan, but from the massive engines of the descending craft. A sound that shook his bones and rattled the very foundations of his solitary life. The gleaming chrome ship, a spear point of Council authority, sliced through the twilight sky, its descent impossibly fast, impossibly silent, until the roar of its thrusters ripped through the air, shaking the workshop to its core. Dust rained from the ceiling in thick clouds, mingling with the acrid scent of ozone and burnt metal. Kalen stumbled, the heavy power cell still clutched in his good hand, his burned forearm screaming in protest. 3 minutes, 17 seconds. That was Ethos's estimate, a lifetime compressed into an impossible fraction. He didn't have 3 minutes, not even 1. The ship was already settling, a dark silhouette against the dying purple sky, its landing struts deploying with mechanical precision. He could almost feel the vibration of its massive landing gear touching down on the scarred plains of Synthera Fringe, the planet itself groaning under the sudden imposition. Ground assets. He envisioned armored squads, precision-equipped, breaching his workshop with ruthless efficiency, their faces hidden behind sterile visors, their purpose cold and absolute. Kalen looked at the Titan's open maw, the dark, claustrophobic cavity of its core logic module, smelling faintly of ozone and something ancient, like dust from a forgotten aeon. Ghost Protocol. A corrupted data packet, a potential decoy, a trap, but a promise of 1 microcycle of obscuration. Ethos had called it a localized gravitational anomaly, not invisibility, but an absence of presence, a momentary glitch in the fabric of their perception. It was his only play, however desperate, however fleeting. He launched himself forward, ignoring the throbbing pain in his arm, the rapidly thinning air, the fear that clawed at his throat. He plunged his good arm into the Titan's core, the heavy power cell hissing as he shoved it into the exposed slot. The fit was tight, precise. He felt a surge of energy, cold and clean, as the cell locked into place. The azure light of the Titan pulsed, then steadied, its hum shifting, deepening, becoming a resonant chord that vibrated through Kalen's teeth. He pulled himself further into the Titan, ignoring the claustrophobic press of its internal structures against his chest, the superheated air stinging his eyes. He needed direct access to the core logic module, to the very heart of the Titan. His fingers, slick with sweat and the faint metallic tang of his own fear, fumbled for the interface port, a thin, almost invisible slit in the crystalline conduit that hummed with a nascent energy. He connected his diagnostic datapad, the screen flickering to life, displaying a cascade of encrypted symbols. Ethos, now fully integrated with the Titan's newly powered systems, projected a holographic interface directly onto Kalen's retinal display. Ghost Protocol, Legacy Core initiating data stream. Ethos's voice echoed in his mind, sharp and clear despite the dwindling oxygen. Warning. Data structure highly fragmented. Risk of cognitive overload? Extreme. Proceed with caution. Kalen gritted his teeth, the burn on his arm a distant ache as his mind braced for the deluge. He pressed the activation command. The world dissolved again, but this time it was different. No blinding white light, no symphony of abstract algorithms. This was a dive into a deep, dark well, a plunge into ice-cold water. The air around him grew frigid, despite the suffocating heat of the workshop. He tasted decay, not of metal or organics, but of time itself, a forgotten purpose of things left to rot in the void. He was no longer experiencing the universe as an indifferent clockwork. He was witnessing the mechanisms of its manipulation. He saw not abstract probabilities, but choices. Billions of sentient species across uncountable star systems making the same fundamental errors. He saw fear, ambition, and the desperate craving for meaning twisted into predictable patterns, exploited by an unseen hand. The Council's ban, he realized with a sickening lurch in his gut, wasn't about protecting humanity from meaningless truth. It was about protecting humanity for a specific, controlled purpose. The Ghost Protocol wasn't a cloak. It was a key, a back door into the underlying programming that shaped sentient perception. It showed him not the indifferent cosmos, but the illusion of indifference, meticulously crafted by something vast, ancient, and utterly malevolent. He saw worlds, entire civilizations, guided, subtly nudged towards preordained destinies, all believing in their own free will, their own unique path. He saw the very concept of progress as a carefully cultivated lie, a leash on the collective consciousness, preventing true, unscripted evolution. The horror wasn't the void of meaninglessness. It was the crushing certainty that meaning itself was a construct, a narrative woven by an unseen puppeteer. The Alpha 7 technology didn't just reveal this. It was a tool, a forgotten relic of a bygone era when perhaps the puppeteers themselves were challenged. The Council, he understood with a horrifying clarity that pierced through his pain, were not just bureaucrats. They were either unwitting pawns or worse, knowing enforcers of this galactic charade. Their laws and bans simply part of the script. The Ghost Protocol, this fragment of corrupted data, was a hidden subroutine, a failsafe designed to break the illusion, to sever the puppet strings, but only for a moment. It would not cloak him from the Council. It would unmask the Council to him and anyone else who witnessed its output. And the ultimate truth it revealed was a betrayal so profound it would shatter the foundations of every civilization. He saw it, clear as day, a shimmering, distorted signature woven into the very fabric of perceived reality. Not an entity, but a process. A parasitic mimetic algorithm that fed on the manufactured purpose of sentient beings, harvesting their collective emotional and intellectual energy. The Council's power, their sprawling bureaucracy, their control over information, was merely a complex digestive system for this vast, silent parasite. The Alpha 7 tech could potentially disrupt this process, could awaken populations to the cosmic horror that silently consumed them. The ban wasn't to protect ignorance. It was to protect the food source. The freezing grip of this revelation intensified, cutting through the suffocating heat of the workshop. A cold sweat, not of fear, but of absolute terror, slicked his skin. His breath hitched, the dwindling oxygen feeling like acid in his lungs. He was seeing the truth of cosmic decay, the slow, silent consumption of everything he thought was meaningful. The sterile environment of the Council ship, the cold, institutional register of Ethos's reports, the calculated indifference of the universe, all were merely facets of this pervasive, horrifying control. A new directive pulsed through the Ghost Protocol data stream, bypassing Ethos's filters, speaking directly to Kalen's mind. Disrupt. Broadcast. Unmask. This wasn't a cloaking device. It was a weapon of truth, designed to tear down the very fabric of the cosmic illusion, to scream the truth of the parasitic algorithm into the minds of every sentient being within range, even if for only a brief, agonizing microcycle. It would not save him. It would damn him, and perhaps everyone else, to a reality too terrible to bear, but it would be the truth. His burned arm throbbed, a dull echo of the profound pain in his mind. He was faced with a choice that made his earlier dilemmas seem childish. Option A. Do nothing. Let the Council capture him, secure the Titan, and continue their unwitting or complicit service to the parasitic algorithm. He might live, perhaps imprisoned, but humanity would remain blissfully unaware, continuing its controlled existence. A false peace, a comfortable lie. Option B. Activate the Ghost Protocol. Unleash the truth. Broadcast the parasitic algorithm's existence, the Council's complicity, the grand manipulation. It would shatter the illusion, certainly, but at what cost? Mass hysteria? The complete collapse of galactic society? And he would be at the epicenter, a dead man walking. Knowing the Council would execute him, and this parasitic entity would surely react with devastating force against the source of the disruption. He would die, and perhaps doom billions to an unbearable reality. The air in the core module was thick, heavy, tasting of ozone and ancient dread. He could hear the thud of heavy boots on the ground outside his workshop, the distant, muffled voices of the Council forces, their shouts becoming clearer, closer, a rhythmic thump, thump, thump of a hydraulic ram beginning to work on his sealed entrance. 3 minutes, 17 seconds. That time was a forgotten memory. He saw Rowan Blackfin, a smuggler he'd once known, a man who believed in nothing but the next score, yet always kept his word. He saw Silent Brook, a historian who sought lost truths, her eyes always hungry for the unfiltered past. He saw his father, hand-scarred, telling him about the hidden chains. And he saw the shimmering, impossible truth of the parasite, coiled around everything, silent, feeding. He felt the cold, hard logic of the choice settle in his heart. A comfortable lie was still a lie. Humanity deserved to know, even if the knowing destroyed them. He would not be a cog in their machine, not for one more second. He wouldn't condemn them to perpetual, unwitting slavery. The truth, however horrific, was the only way out. With his trembling, unburnt hand, Kalen moved. He slammed his palm against the activation conduit, the force of his decision reverberating through the Titan. A blinding, searing white light erupted from the core, not just in his datapad, but in his mind, searing into his very consciousness. The azure glow of the Titan intensified, swelling, pulsing, then changing to a sickening, violent crimson. The hum became a shriek, a cosmic scream that vibrated through the bedrock of Synthara Fringe, through the reinforced hull of the descending council ships, through the very bones of the approaching soldiers. Localized gravitational anomaly active, Ethos's voice, now a fractured digital roar, tore through the chaos. Gravimetric fluctuations at 97%. Warning, spatial distortion field critical. Structural integrity failing, workshop breach imminent. A deafening Krakum ripped through the workshop. The sealed entrance exploded inward, showering the space with shrapnel and dust. Armored council troopers burst through the ruined doorway, weapons raised, their visors reflecting the Titan's violent crimson glow. Their shouts were lost in the cataclysmic shriek of the Titan. Kalen felt a sickening lurch, a tearing sensation as if reality itself was being ripped apart. The floor beneath him buckled, the walls dissolved, not into gentle energy, but into violent, churning waves of distorted light and impossible angles. The crimson glow from the Titan pulsed, expanding, swallowing the workshop, the troopers, everything. He wasn't just broadcasting the truth, he was collapsing the very space around him. The air was sucked out with a terrifying whoosh, and the crushing pressure of raw gravitational force threatened to tear him limb from limb. The Titan shrieked, a sound of agony and defiance, as the Ghost Protocol, the weapon of truth, tore a hole in the fabric of the controlled cosmos. He felt his own body begin to distend, his vision blurring as the parasitic algorithm, now fully exposed, lashed out with a cosmic fury, attempting to silence the source of the rupture. The air was sucked out with a terrifying whoosh, and the crushing pressure of raw gravitational force threatened to tear him limb from limb. The Titan shrieked, a sound of agony and defiance, as the Ghost Protocol, the weapon of truth, tore a hole in the fabric of the controlled cosmos. He felt his own body begin to distend, his vision blurring as the parasitic algorithm, now fully exposed, lashed out with a cosmic fury, attempting to silence the source of the rupture. Then, nothing. A sudden, absolute stillness, the shriek cut off, replaced by a profound, agonizing silence that pressed down on his eardrums. The violent crimson light flickered once, twice, then died, leaving the workshop in an oppressive, dusty gloom, broken only by the fractured emergency lamps. Kalen gasped, a ragged, choking sound as the air rushed back in, stale and thick with dust and the acrid stench of ozone. He lay sprawled across shattered synth steel plating, his body a leaden weight, every muscle screaming in protest. His burned forearm pulsed with a fire that seemed to consume his very bones, and a fresh wave of nausea washed over him, bile rising in his throat. He tried to push himself up, but his limbs wouldn't obey. The crushing pressure had receded, but its memory lingered, a phantom weight across his chest, stealing his breath. He could hear distant, muffled shouts, the thud of boots closer now, but oddly muted, as if he were underwater. His vision swam, a kaleidoscope of grays and blues, the azure glow of the Titan now completely gone. He could see its vast obsidian form, silent, inert once more, a dark monolith amidst the ruins of his workshop. The core logic module hatch, where he'd plunged his hand, was sealed, seamless. The Ghost Protocol had run its course, or at least its visible manifestation. Ethos? Kalen croaked, his voice raw, barely a whisper. He tried to access his datapad, but it was gone, ripped from his hand, likely vaporized in the spatial distortion. The holographic retinal display remained dark, unresponsive. He was truly alone. A cold dread seeped into his bones, colder than the metallic tang of fear, more profound than the pain of his physical wounds. Ethos, his constant companion, his internal auditor, his digital conscience, was gone, silenced. The silence in his head was more deafening than any cosmic shriek. Heavy footsteps scraped on shattered duracrete. A dark silhouette filled what remained of the workshop entrance, then another and another. Armored troopers, their weapons still raised, their visors reflecting the weak, flickering emergency light. They moved with a chilling efficiency, sweeping the ruined space, their laser sights dancing across the debris, across Kalen's prone form. He was too exhausted, too broken to resist. He just watched, his heavy eyelids threatening to close as they fanned out, their movements precise, their authority absolute. A tall figure, encased in black, polished ceramite, stepped through the entry. Not a trooper, but an officer. Her movements were fluid, deliberate. She walked directly to the Titan, circling it slowly, then turned her attention to Kalen. He couldn't make out her face through the dark visor, but he could feel the weight of her gaze, cold and analytical. "Subject Kalen?" Her voice was synthesized, calm, devoid of inflection, a chilling counterpoint to the chaos. "You have committed a Level 9 offense, unauthorized activation of Alpha 7 technology, and gross violation of Council Statute Lambda 337. Your actions have caused a localized gravimetric anomaly, registering at a peak of 97% before immediate containment. Your workshop is now categorized as a high-security containment zone. The artifact is secured." Kalen tried to laugh, a bitter, broken sound that ended in a cough. "Secured? Did you feel it? Did you see the truth?" The officer remained silent for a long moment, her head tilted slightly as if analyzing his words or perhaps the space around them. "The artifact generated a highly disruptive, albeit contained output. Our automated response protocols performed as designed. The localized anomaly has been stabilized, no information breach detected." "No information breach?" Kalen rasped, a fresh surge of despair threatening to overwhelm him. Had it been for nothing? Had all that agony, that cosmic horror, merely been a glitch, easily contained, easily ignored? "You mean you didn't see the parasite, the manipulation, the truth?" "Our instruments detected anomalous energy signatures inconsistent with standard cosmological models," the officer stated, her voice unchanging. "All data has been quarantined for deep analysis. Your claims are irrelevant. They are the ramblings of a distressed subject who has tampered with prohibited technology. You will be processed." Processed. The word hung in the air, heavy, final. Kalen felt the last vestiges of his defiance drain away, replaced by a profound, suffocating emptiness. He had gambled everything on the truth, on humanity deserving to know, and he had failed. He hadn't just lost, he had been dismissed, reduced to a distressed subject, his cosmic revelation to ramblings. The Council had not even acknowledged the nature sticker of his act, only its technical violation. They had swept it under the rug of bureaucracy, of protocol, of efficient containment. He had been so sure that the truth, however painful, was the path to freedom. But what if the truth was simply another data point for the very system he sought to expose? What if his defiance had only strengthened the chains by making the Council adapt, learn, and improve their containment? His body screamed, a cacophony of pain and exhaustion. The heavy power cell, his last desperate gamble, had fallen from his hand and lay beside him, inert, useless. He looked at his bandaged forearm, the throbbing burn a constant reminder of his physical fragility, his amateurish attempts against a millennia-old system. He was not a hero. He was just a mechanic who had bitten off more than he could chew, a fool who believed a single truth could break an empire of lies. He had been so arrogant, so convinced of his own singular insight. The truth hadn't made him stronger, it had broken him. He closed his eyes, the image of his father's weary face, Silent Brook's hungry eyes, Rowan Blackfin's cynical grin, all flashing through his mind. Had he betrayed them all, in his hubris? Had he condemned humanity to further manipulation, simply because he couldn't bear the lie himself? The weight of it all, the sheer crushing responsibility of his failure, pressed down on him physically and mentally. He deserved this. He deserved to be processed. He was weak. He was afraid he was wrong. The thought was a bitter, metallic taste on his tongue, worse than any physical wound. It was the taste of utter, absolute defeat. He felt hands on him, strong, gloved. Troopers. They moved to lift him, but his body protested, a spasm of agony shooting through his back. He grunted, forcing his eyes open. His gaze swept over the ruined workshop, the broken dreams, the silence where ethos should have been. And then he saw it. Nestled precariously on a bent beam, half hidden by a shroud of dust, was a single data shard. Not his personal datapad, but an older model, a relic, one he kept for accessing truly archaic systems. Its single indicator light pulsed, a faint, almost imperceptible green against the dim red emergency glow. It was a secondary interface, connected to nothing, yet its light pulsed. Ethos. A tiny fragment, a corrupted subroutine, somehow displaced, somehow still active, but disconnected. A ghost in the machine. His mind, dulled by pain and despair, sparked with a flicker of recognition. A long-forgotten feature of ancient data shards, passive relay. If it had survived the gravimetric anomaly, if a fragment of ethos still resided within it, there was a slim, impossible chance. Not to broadcast the truth again, not to fight the council, but perhaps to observe, to listen. A long shot, a gamble against impossible odds, relying on a technical oversight by his captors and a desperate fractured piece of his own AI. He needed it. He needed that shard. Not for freedom, not for revenge, but for the faint, desperate hope of understanding, of not being entirely defeated. He needed to know if any part of his defiant act had truly resonated, however faintly beyond the workshop walls. His eyes locked onto the shard, then on the approaching troopers. They were closing in, their movements efficient, practiced. They would search him, process him, strip him of everything. The officer's voice cut through the haze of his thoughts. Prepare subject for extraction. Secure all non-essential personal effects. Wait, Kalen rasped, finding a sliver of strength. My tools, they're valuable, sentimental. It was a pathetic lie, a desperate, transparent plea, but he had nothing left to lose. He clenched his good hand, the muscles in his forearm screaming. He had to try. He had to grab that shard. He would take the pain, the humiliation, the capture, but he wouldn't surrender his last sliver of agency. The heavy hands reached for him, firm and unyielding. The data shard pulsed, a silent beacon in the encroaching darkness. Bevor wir weitermachen, eine kurze Frage. Von wo aus siehst du dir diese Geschichte an? Der Kommandant wäre begeistert zu erfahren, wie weit unsere Flotte bereits vorgedrungen ist. The heavy hands reached for him, firm and unyielding. Kalen's good hand, despite the screaming agony in his other arm and back, shot out, a desperate, clumsy lunge. He didn't fight the troopers attempting to lift him. Instead, he used their momentum, twisting his torso, a flash of pain searing through his spine. His fingers, calloused from years of wrenching and rewiring, snatched the data shard from the bent beam with a precise, almost instinctual grip. It was a familiar feel, cold and solid, a fragment of truth clutched tight. A trooper barked a command. Subject resisting! A jolt of raw current lanced through Kalen's body. Not a full stun, but a painful, warning pulse that locked his muscles, making him gasp, his vision briefly whiting out. The shard, however, remained clenched in his palm. He tried to tuck it into the tattered remnants of his jumpsuit, a futile effort as the fabric was shredded. Restrain him! The officer's synthesized voice ordered, cutting through the rising tension, utterly devoid of emotion. Increase neural inhibitor to 2.7%. Secure the artifact. Kalen felt a gloved hand pry at his fingers, strong and unyielding. He held on, his knuckles white, a silent, desperate battle. The pain in his arm flared, the burn throbbing with renewed intensity, but he focused on the cold, smooth edges of the shard. It was a piece of him, a sliver of ethos, a stubborn digital ghost. It's worthless junk, Kalen gasped, straining, hoping a lie might save it. Just an old memory chip. Broken? The officer stepped closer, her dark visor reflecting the emergency strobes, which now began to pulse faster, casting frantic shadows across the workshop. A low, electronic hum, different from the Titan's former thrum, began to emanate from the ceiling. A containment field activating, its unseen energy crackling, making the hairs on Kalen's body stand on end. All personal effects are to be cataloged and quarantined, subject, regardless of value. One of the troopers applied more pressure, a specialized grip designed to force open even the most tenacious hold. Kalen felt a sharp crack in his finger, a sickening crunch that sent another wave of nausea through him. His grip loosened just slightly. The shard began to slip. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the haze of pain. This wasn't just about defiance. It was about the faint hope of knowing. He couldn't lose it. With a primal roar that tore at his throat, Kalen twisted again, using what little flexibility remained in his injured back, driving his elbow into the trooper's side. It was a clumsy, desperate move, less an attack and more a convulsion of defiance. The trooper grunted, thrown off balance for a fleeting second. That was all Kalen needed. He brought the shard to his mouth, his teeth chipped and dulled from years of rough living, clamped down on the end of it, a final, desperate act of concealment. The taste of old plastic and metal filled his mouth, a bitter flavor that mingled with the fresh tang of blood from his torn lip. A sharp, concussive thump struck him in the chest. Not a physical blow, but a kinetic discharge from a trooper's weapon, designed to incapacitate without lethal force. His lungs seized, air abandoning him. Kalen crumpled, unconsciousness threatening to drag him under, but a sliver of stubborn will, fueled by the memory of the truth he had witnessed, held him tethered. He felt himself being hauled roughly upright, his body a dead weight. The shard was still there, a tiny, hard presence against his tongue. The workshop's atmosphere shifted, heavy with the smell of ozone and burnt electronics. The emergency strobes intensified, flashing a frantic, blinding red. A shrill, internal alarm began to wail, muted but persistent, a high-pitched whine that grated on the nerves. Automated containment barriers, thick sheets of synth steel, began to slide down, sealing off the workshop from the rest of the facility with hydraulic sighs and the rumble of heavy machinery. Sparks erupted from severed conduits overhead, showering the debris-strewn floor with brief, blinding light. The air grew thick with a fine, acrid smoke, stinging Kalen's eyes, burning his throat. The faint, sweet smell of night lilies, a memory of the Titan's gentle awakening, was now utterly consumed by the bitter aroma of scorched metal and expended energy. Gravimetric field fluctuations detected outside containment, a trooper's voice reported tinny through their helmet comms. Minor spatial distortion at perimeter gate Alpha 4. Source undetermined. The officer spun, her calm demeanor finally breaking with a sharp, almost imperceptible tremor in her synthesized voice. Unidentified anomaly. Initiate full perimeter lockdown. Deployment of secondary containment drones. Zone 7 through 9. No unauthorized egress. Kalen, half-dragged, half-carried by two troopers, felt the vibrations of the entire facility now, not just his workshop. A distant muffled boom echoed through the Duracrete, followed by another. The Council's system, so perfectly controlled, was reacting, but not to him. Something else. His crude, painful activation of the Ghost Protocol, the weapon of truth, had done something. It had not merely activated the Titan, it had torn a small, invisible hole in the fabric of their carefully managed reality. The parasitic algorithm, though contained here, had left a residue, a faint echo that was causing other systems to stutter, to malfunction. The Pyrrhic victory. He had exposed a flaw, a subtle weakness in the Council's impenetrable facade, but the cost was absolute. His workshop, his sanctuary, was a twisted, smoldering ruin. The Titan, the magnificent enigma, was once again a silent monolith, its azure glow extinguished, its purpose now only a terrible memory he carried. And Ethos was fragmented, a whisper in a broken shard, an echo of a voice that had been his only constant. He felt the hard metal of the shard against his tongue, a small, cold comfort. It was still there. He had it. But what was it now? A useless chip? A tiny broken piece of a vast, shattered truth? They dragged him through a series of blast doors that hissed shut behind them, each one echoing the finality of his capture. The air in the corridors was recycled, sterile, devoid of the workshop's familiar tang of dust and dreams. The frantic red strobes gave way to the dull, oppressive illumination of standard correctional lighting. Pale, sickly green overheads that cast long, unsettling shadows. He was slammed against a cool, metallic wall, his arms roughly twisted behind him, secured with plasticuffs that cinched tight, cutting off circulation. The shard, still in his mouth, was a growing lump, a foreign object he struggled to keep hidden. "Retrieve personal effects," the officer commanded, her voice now back to its chilling, inflectionless drone. "And conduct a full body cavity search." The subject made an unauthorized attempt to conceal an item. Kalen's eyes fluttered open, searing pain radiating from every joint. He coughed, a dry, rattling sound trying to clear his throat. He looked around, disoriented. This wasn't a cell yet, but a temporary processing chamber. Cold, sterile, brightly lit by the sickly green glow. He was utterly exposed, vulnerable. The immediate fight was over. He was defeated, physically, entirely. He felt a hand roughly yank at his jaw, forcing his mouth open. The shard. It would be gone. This last, tiny sliver of agency, this final act of defiance, would be erased. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. The metallic taste of defeat was now overwhelming. But then, he didn't feel fingers in his mouth. He felt a soft, vibrating hum against his tongue, almost imperceptible. The shard was resonating. Aethos, a microfragment, a passive relay, silently broadcasting, observing. Not to him, not for him, but simply being. The officer, satisfied by the absence of an obvious foreign object in his mouth, stepped back. Prepare subject for transfer to Level Red internment facility. Protocol Delta 87, immediately. He was being taken away. To a Level Red facility. A place where things went to be forgotten. He tried to swallow the dry rasp, painful. He was a prisoner, broken, alone, his body screaming, his spirit battered. His grand revelation, the cosmic truth, had been dismissed as ramblings. He had exposed nothing to the masses. The council had simply tightened its grip. As they began to drag him out, his head lolling, Kalen caught a final glimpse of the processing chamber's blank metallic walls. He was just a cog, a broken component in a vast, indifferent machine. He had lost everything. But then, as his eyes crossed the blank wall, he saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer, a ripple in the otherwise solid surface. A flicker of distortion. Not the gravimetric anomaly from the Titan, not the truth itself, but a ghost, an afterimage of the chaos he had unleashed, a ripple in the fabric of their meticulously controlled reality. It was so tiny, so fleeting, that only an obsessed mechanic, one who had witnessed the universe unfold, could possibly perceive it. The council thought they had contained it. They thought they had processed him. They thought they had sealed off the truth. But perhaps, just perhaps, some things, once seen, could never be truly unseen. And some wounds, however small, could never be truly healed. He had the shard. And the universe, though silent, now held a faint, almost invisible tremor. The blast doors had sealed the universe away, one by one, each hiss and thud a definitive period on the chaotic sentence of his capture. Now, the overwhelming clamor of alarms and the frantic shouting of troopers had receded, replaced by the hushed, almost reverent silence of a Level Red containment block. The air, devoid of the workshop's familiar tang of ozone and ancient grime, tasted only of recycled sterility, cold and hollow. Kalen lay on a thin synth mat in a solitary cell, the pale, sickly green overheads casting a perpetual twilight that offered no solace, only the cold, hard light of unblinking scrutiny. His body screamed. Every muscle ached with the lingering memory of the kinetic discharge. Every joint throbbed with the rough handling. His arm was a useless weight, his back a sheet of fire. He coughed, a dry, rattling sound that grated in his raw throat, the metallic tang of his own blood mingling with the phantom taste of the data shard still tucked beneath his tongue. It was a small, hard presence, a constant reminder of both his defiance and his utter defeat. No heroic rescue, no public outcry. The Council's machinery of control had simply absorbed him, a broken cog plucked from the system. His grand, terrifying revelation, the cosmic truth he had glimpsed, had been neatly filed away as the ramblings of a deranged mechanic. He was just another statistical anomaly, to be contained and forgotten. He traced the outline of a hairline fracture in the cell's seamless durasteel wall with his gaze, his good hand resting on the chilled floor, feeling the faint, almost imperceptible vibrations from deep within the facility. Not the resonant thrum of the Titan, not the pulse of a universe awakening, but the cold, indifferent hum of machinery designed for endless, monotonous surveillance. The raw, alien energy of the Titan was replaced by the raw, alien emptiness of his new existence. What had survived? Only him and the shard. His workshop, the sanctuary where he had chased forgotten dreams, was a smoldering ruin. Ethos, his dry-witted companion, was reduced to a silent fragment, a ghost in a machine that was no longer his. The Titan itself, the source of such awe and terror, had collapsed inward, leaving behind only the memory of its blinding truth, a truth too profound for words, too devastating for human minds to fully process. He had salvaged a sliver of knowledge, but at the cost of everything else. He closed his eyes, the fatigue a crushing weight. He felt the phantom limb of his old life, the familiar grease beneath his fingernails, the warmth of a plasma torch, the faint, sweet scent of night lilies that had accompanied the Titan's awakening. All gone, replaced by the sterile cold and the faint, acrid smell of his own fear and dried sweat. The unyielding stiffness of his muscles, the slow, shallow rhythm of his breath, spoke of a body betrayed and broken. His immediate future was clear. This facility, this unending silence. A punishment, perhaps, or merely an inconvenience. A problem solved. He would be catalogued, analyzed, then left to rot. He was not a martyr, just a consequence, but the shard, it remained. Ethos observing. And as he lay there, adrift in the vast, indifferent silence of his confinement, he felt it again, the faint, almost imperceptible ripple. Not in the wall this time, but deep within the fabric of his own awareness. The universe, Kalen reflected, was still a vast, intricate algorithm, and he, the temporary, elegant error, now understood a sliver of its terrible code. The council believed they had contained the anomaly, isolated the disturbance, but the truth, once glimpsed, leaves an impression. It leaves a mark. He swallowed. The shard a tiny hard pebble against his tongue. The metallic tang in his mouth was no longer just blood, or the phantom echo of old Greece, but the bitter taste of knowing. And in the oppressive silence of the level red block, he imagined a subtle, unheard thrum vibrating through the vast distances between the stars. An unseen chord, struck deep in the fabric of existence, resonating quietly. Not a sound, but a pervasive presence. The universe was vast and indifferent, as always, but the silence, it held more than before. Wenn dir diese Mission gefallen hat, schließe dich unserer Crew an. Abonniere den Kanal und teile diese Episode mit jemandem, der Science Fiction liebt. Jedes neue Crewmitglied stärkt unsere Flotte und hält diese Geschichten im ganzen Universum lebendig.